Conversation is going round. People talking about the colors come to town. Fresh as a summer breeze, she'll take you by surprise.
Good morning and welcome to another fabulous episode of Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Brenda Masson. Today we will be speaking with two wonderful women about Christmas traditions, the origin of the traditions, the origins of the season, and we'll be talking about the solstice. Solstice is a really cool thing. It's the longest night of the year, the shortest day of the year. It's what inspired so many of the traditions around this holiday season. And I'm very privileged to have in the studio this morning the one and only Laurie Benson. Good morning, Laurie. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine.
Now, you've been joining us every year for the last 4 or 5 years, and we love having you on for this show. And we have Betty Jane Ware, who's a newbie relatively newbie.
Okay, I'll take that. Thank you.
We had you on in October, and we were speaking about All Hallowed Saints and all the ooky spookies of Halloween.
We were, and it was fun.
It was a lot of fun, and I said, we'll have you back for the solstice, and here you are for the solstice show.
Yes, I am. And it's wonderful to be here and seeing Laurie again because it's been a while.
It has. It really has.
I don't want to say how many.
Okay, but that's okay because now we're starting again. But you guys already know each other, which is kind of cool. And it's really nice to be sitting in the studio with a bunch of like-minded people. And we will start at the beginnings of this season. And I know, Laurie, you and I have talked about it before, and we'll enlighten the listeners today with some of the pagan rituals. And I have a little bit of a problem sometime with the word pagan, because we know that it is nothing but good things. But a lot of people still get freaked out by it, thinking that it's all about witches and witchcraft and black magic.
Oh, because it's so non-Christian, which is basically what pagan is. I mean, even people would say if you are Hindu, you're pagan. But there's a lot of beautiful spirituality and worship and recognizing the old deities. And so pagan really is pre-Christian. And it's outside of Christianity is so young.
It's so new.
It's
relatively
so new,
speaking.
right? You know,
Judaism is 5,000 years old.
Yeah. Hinduism, well,
yes.
Really. So it's all religion is good when people respond to it in a loving way. And when you go back to the old pagan traditions, they have given so much to the newer religions. So when you say, keep the Christ in Christmas, well, no, Christmas is way before Christ. It goes back so far because, yes, as you said, the solstice is about the longest night of the year. There's no changing that. That predates everything.
Absolutely. It's kind of back to the dinosaurs, too, isn't it?
Before dinosaurs.
Even before dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's this longest night of the year.
Yeah.
The summer solstice is the longest day of the year.
Mm-hmm. We sure celebrate that.
Oh, I do, personally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Warm weather and sunshine and a long, long day. I have jingles on, which I might take off, but I just thought it was a little festive. Just in case anyone thinks that they're hearing bells, they actually are. All right, so we've got paganism, which we are going to consider not as a religion necessarily for today, but just as the ways of ancient peoples before Christianity, even before Judaism, before all organized religion. Mm-hmm. People still did things. They still had rituals. And they weren't all black magic. They were actually good things, celebratory things. So how about we talk about the fact that this season of darkness is in many ways about bringing in the light. Is it not?
Of
It's
course.
all about bringing in the light, really.
Yeah. Yes.
The light and the green. So people brought greenery, like evergreen trees that stay green all year round, into their homes to symbolize
everlasting life. Because evergreen, the clue is in the name, it doesn't die.
Arbor vitae, the tree of life. Another name for cedar. And cedar is so magical. So, yes, bringing everything in also is bringing the life energy into your home to make sure that everything is going to continue. Because it must have been really scary a long time ago if you didn't actually trust in calendars. You didn't have printed word. You didn't know that after the solstice, that days were going to really get longer. You had to trust, and you had to actually put your own energy into bringing that trust back to life, right? So you have your holly, of course, blooming in the winter, the ivies that stay evergreen, and, of course, the trees of life.
Okay. And all of those things were brought into the homes, even mistletoe, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, mistletoe.
I have no idea why people kiss under mistletoe. Do either of you?
Mistletoe's the feminine aspect, so not sure really. I just know that you do, and I don't complain about it.
Well, you could complain about it. I know as a teenager, people complained about it all the time. They were like, "Ew, gross."
Depending on who they were kissing.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
But what a way to affirm future life.
That's true, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these traditions around solstice. So we just talked about bringing in some green. What does that also lead to? It leads to that big tree that everyone has in their house.
Oh, yeah.
The Christmas tree. It's not a Christian tradition, although it has become a Christian tradition, but it predates Christianity, does it not?
Oh, absolutely. It only became a Christmas tree in the Victorian times. It became called the Christmas tree because Queen Victoria had married a German prince, I guess.
Albert, yeah.
Yeah, Albert. And so the ancient German tradition was bringing in a Christmas tree. So we didn't even have that in our tradition until after Victoria started doing the Christmas tree. But before that, of course, the ancient pagan tradition, bringing in a tree, bringing in garlands, bringing in boughs, you'd bring in everything that you could to reaffirm the fact that life would continue after the darkest days.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, too, because in all cultures, First Nations included, cedar is a special tree. And now we know scientifically that what they believed back then has been proven by science. It is disinfecting. Mm-hmm. It has antibacterial properties. It's cleansing. The smell is great. We used to hang cedar boughs in our outhouse to keep the outhouse smelling nice. You didn't have to buy Febreze or any other kind of chemical concoction. Just hang some cedar boughs and every week or so replace them. Mm-hmm. And now we know scientifically that all of this bringing in, winter in the Celtic homes 5,000 years ago was not a pleasant thing. Weren't the houses made of peat and things like that? There was always a fire going, and people were coughing, and it smelled bad by February. Can you just imagine?
Yes. We've evolved.
We've evolved. But bringing in of the cedar, they did back then for the same reasons that we do today. It smells nice. It makes the air feel purer.
Mm-hmm. I was actually told by a very old renovation guy. I have an old Victorian house, and of course it's got the fieldstone foundation, very damp basement. And he was doing some work outside. He says, love these old houses. Do you know, if you bring cedar into your basement, it will absorb the moisture and help purify any of that mildew thing going on in the basement. I went, oh, how interesting, because I was trimming back some cedar hedges and I put bunches of things in the basement, and I didn't get that basement smell ever again. I keep cedar in my basement all the time now.
So you actually put it down there when it's green and it dries out, then what do you do?
It dries out, well, then you can burn it. So I keep on putting it fresh every year, but it's amazing. And so arbor vitae, cedar, tree of life. You're right, Brenda, they have done studies on burning cedar as a smudge and other smudge things. They've tested the bacteria in the air beforehand and afterhand, and there is no bacteria for up to 48 hours in a home where you've burnt either sweetgrass or cedar or different other traditional frankincense, myrrh. Right? Yes. Right? So, purification, people being indoors in the cold weather. We've got all those things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just at a aromatherapy and essential oils workshop on the weekend, and one of the things that they suggested was taking the arbor vitae and putting it on a wall in your shower, just a couple of drops on the wall that doesn't have the water hitting it. And the steam will take that beautiful scent through your shower, which is great for you. It's invigorating and energizing and all the rest of it, but it also keeps your mold under control in the shower without having to use really harsh chemicals that are detrimental to everybody's health, including the mold. But anyway.
Yes. Cedar also has something in it that stops rodents, mice, whatever, from coming in as well.
Oh, really?
So it's
they don't like it either?
They don't like it either.
And moths.
And moths.
The cedar chests.
Yeah.
Oh, right. We used to have a cedar chest, and that keeps the moths out. Yes, isn't that neat?
Yeah.
See? All these ancient things, and they now are coming years later, thousands of years later. There's method to the madness.
And cedar also, you use it in sweat lodge. There's cedar water, and when you think, okay, you're in a sweat lodge with a whole bunch of people in a very, very hot environment, but it's purified. There will be no transfer of anything. And also, drinking cedar tea is amazing for you. It gives you a vibrancy and energy. Of course, it's clearing bacteria from your system as well. But it also has a little compound called thuion. Thuia is the Latin name for cedar. Thuion is also in absinthe. If you drink enough cedar tea, you can have a little buzz.
Isn't that funny?
Did you not know that?
I didn't know that. I know nutmeg's a hallucinogen if you sniff enough of it. Not saying that anyone should go out and sniff nutmeg by any means, but it is a hallucinogen.
So we're baking nutmeg cookies this afternoon,
Yeah.
drinking cedar tea.
And drinking cedar
Cedar
tea.
tea. Now, I will make a note. We did have a lady on who's a herbologist several weeks ago, Karen Stevenson, and she sent me a note right after the show to make sure that people who are making cedar tea, hemlock tea, you can go and chop the nice green shoots of the hemlock, boil it up on the stove and make a tea. It's got more vitamin C than any other plant on earth.
It's fabulous.
Cedar, on the other hand, you should dry before you make it into a tea, just because cedar oils can be turpentine. And we don't want to be drinking turpentine. So cedar is the one that you should dry first before you make it into a tea. But to put cedar boughs in your house at Christmas time or any time.
Absolutely.
It's just fantastic. And put them green right out of the forest, tied in a little bit of cotton twine, and just stick them wherever you want to make a nice smell.
Absolutely.
Isn't that wonderful? All right, we're going to take our first little break here on Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Brenda Masson, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion of the roots of Christmas and the solstice celebrations with Laurie and Betty Jane. We'll be right back, so stay tuned.
Heading out to celebrate? Make sure you have a plan, like a designated driver. Call a cab, a sober friend, or stay over. Have no plan? Well, then you need a bucket list. Here are the top 5 things to consider. 1. Write your own obituary. 2. Speak to a funeral director. 3. Say goodbye to your loved ones. 4. Make sure your will is in order. And 5. Give away your favorite items. Your clothes, your car, even your house could be enjoyed by your friends and family after you're gone. If you plan on drinking, don't plan on driving. Visit mad.ca.
We're back on Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Brenda Masson. We're speaking with Betty Jane and Laurie Benson today about the solstice and the roots of the Christmas season. But before we get into that, let's introduce you both to the listeners. Laurie, you've been here before. You are an artist, and that's a relatively new thing. Not that you are new to being an artist, but now you're putting it in shows, and you've got your art all over the place. Every time I look on Facebook, there's a new Laurie piece hanging around that I get to go, like, isn't it beautiful?
Yes, it's one of those things that, unfortunately, you put it in the back of your to-do list as your life goes on, and you raise children, and you do careers, and you do this, and one wonderful thing was I did take a little break when my kids were young and start back at my art by teaching children. So I was an art teacher for a little while, and I found that I hadn't lost the ability, but I still didn't have the time to really work on a whole lot of personal canvases. But in the last few years, I've joined a lot of different art groups, and I've been exhibiting in juried shows. I'm in Toronto tomorrow at a big fundraiser for the Propeller Art Gallery. It's anyone in Toronto and West Queen West tomorrow, drop by and You can bid on artwork on the wall, $145 to get in, but you get to take home a piece of art. When my husband died, and before he died, I really started to embrace the dark side of my artwork, and I was working on a series of harbingers of death, and so death was a big image. Now because in crows and ravens, it's 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy. So now I'm working on the 2, and so I've worked through that, and all of those pieces won awards. The 2 for joy, when it's done, I'm sure is going to be quite wonderful. So I look into a lot of different portents, a lot of messages that come from nature. So bringing us back to the solstice and the beautiful sun that's now fading on us and will come back, and the beautiful greenery that we were talking about.
Well, I must say, we're sorry to hear the passing of Chris. Over the years, we've talked about him several times on the show.
He was a larger-than-life person.
Yeah.
Now
and
he's
very
larger
much
than death.
But he's very much a supporter of you and everything that you do, and that's an admirable thing, because there's a lot of couples who tend to do their own things, and they're very separate in their lives. But that was never the case with you two.
Oh, no.
There was always a great support coming from his side. And we talked about him because I had a listener who phoned me one year after our solstice show, when we had spoken about Wiccans and the fact that you were once looking at that path, but it wasn't your thing. And I asked you about warlocks.
Oh, yes, I remember
Because
that.
somebody had said to me, all male witches are warlocks. That's just the name of a male witch. And then I proposed that to you and said, is that the case? And you said, well, not necessarily. And then I think, Betty Jane, I asked the same question of you and said, is that the case?
No.
Because warlock to me sounds like a really ugly thing. It sounds mean and
I
nasty.
only know
isn't it?
one person that willingly takes the name, and you're absolutely right. It really is, in that case, an ugly thing. But
Yes,
to
yes.
me, it's always
Warlock
been
is a
oathbreaker.
dark word,
Yeah.
and the men that I know who are into the Wiccan path or witchcraft, they're witches. They're just male witches. You have female witches. You have, it's like doctors,
Christians?
lawyers, whatever.
You don't have
female.
You don't differentiate. You're a Christian. You're a Christian. You don't differentiate male or female. So if you're a witch, you're a witch. There's no. If you're a Wiccan, you're a Wiccan. There's no other term.
Now, are all Wiccans pagans?
Wiccans, I would say yes, but witches not necessarily.
Okay.
Because Wiccans is supposed to be a tradition with Gardner or Alexandrian, and it's supposed to be a tradition that goes back to that. We don't kind of follow that as much over here, but in Europe they do. So a witch, that's just the practice of being a witch. So that's your candles, that's your herbs, that's your tarot cards, that's all that. So you can be a Christian witch or a Catholic witch or whatever. It's just a term. Don't get bent out of shape about it. It's just a term.
Except the terms, often the language that we use dictates how it goes. So I think you watch a show like Bewitched and everyone thinks that the warlock is that crazy uncle of hers that comes in every now and again and can't ever get anything right, but really is a little bit on the dark side. And not to make fun of it, but just to say that this is what people see in North America. North America doesn't have the roots into paganism and these different traditions that the other side of the pond has, so to speak. And I don't think we're necessarily as afraid of it, but we tend to kind of push it aside and say, that's nothing.
But many of us can always say, oh, yes, my great aunt was a witch. She was from Ireland.
Yeah.
A lot of us have that. We could always say somebody in the back family had, or there was that. My father is a seventh son. He does have healing abilities. He's amazing. Just because he's a seventh son and he was raised by a woman who was very pagan in her own way. They never went to church. They never had Christianity, and his spirituality is much more native than anything that we would see in the church-going population. Whereas my mother was raised very high Anglican. So I have
Church of England.
Yeah, I have all these backgrounds, and then of course I have friends from every pathway, and I just love learning everything about every little bit of tradition and spirituality. I think it's all fascinating and it's all good.
So would you consider yourself to be a witch then?
I'm a green witch.
Okay, so you're an herbologist.
Yeah. I've that's the only initiation I've taken. I did start studying Wicca, as you mentioned before. I found it was a little bit too rule bound for me. Confining. I said to somebody at one point, if I wanted to be Christian and follow the Catholic path, but I want to be pagan and follow my own path, whereas if I were pagan and following Wicca, it would be like the Catholic path of
paganism.
Of paganism. That would be the Catholic path. So you have your degrees, you have your priestesses and priests, you can wear amber when you get this, you can wear jet when you get that, you can wear certain colored cords when you get this. And I went, no, I want to wear what I want to wear and just be me and
have a really cool garden with lots of neat herbs.
Yeah, exactly. And really the earth is my garden, and I worship the earth. So there you go.
Whereas I did the Wiccan thing, but I did it in England. So I did it a little differently. It didn't fit at the end of it. Like I did everything, my husband and I did it together, and we did everything we were supposed to do. But at the end of it, we kind of went, I think I'm more a community witch. I don't really care about all the labels. And really putting that label on things, that's relatively new because, not that long ago, it was illegal to be a witch or anything other than a Christian. So it just didn't, when it fit, and when it didn't. So I can discard it.
So your background then is also in paganism.
Yeah.
But you are walking your own path as well.
Absolutely. Nobody else wants to walk my path. It's fun.
Well, I've heard it said that if you see your path laid out before you, it's not your path, it's someone else's.
Absolutely.
Find your own.
Absolutely.
But it's a hard thing to do. Laurie, you were saying that you can find someone in your past who was a witch, perhaps, great aunt, whatever, or great uncle, whoever. But, in a lot of ways that can't happen because it was so awful to be a witch and you didn't want to be burned at the stake. And 90% of witches were simply medicine women. Herbologists of the time who could give you something that would make a cold go away or help you with some ailment that someone else just died of and they didn't have to bleed you into a bowl and things like this. And that was threatening to certain people and they burned you at the stake.
Yeah.
Or you predicted that something would happen, it did, and therefore you're a witch. And again, you would be burned at the stake. It's the largest genocide in the human population, is not any Holocaust or any war. It's the genocide against women, most of whom were killed because they were thought to be witches.
Absolutely, but that was centuries ago. So when I'm talking about great aunt and grandmothers and grandfathers and things,
you're talking 100 years ago.
We're talking 100 years ago. It still continued, but it was also known that you would go to my great aunt Jane if you had a woman's problem, and she would use herbs and cards and things and figure out what was going on. You knew that you could go to my aunt Frida, her sister, if you wanted to speak to your late husband because she had the Ouija board. So there was all that kind of spirituality there that was accepted, but not mainstream.
No, not.
But you're not going to get hung for it in this century.
You hope, and you're not going to get burned at a stake for it.
No,
you hope.
No, but you just didn't get married. Or if you did, you had to find a partner who kind of put up with your eccentricities.
I think that still happens.
Yeah,
that's what I was just going to say.
You're right.
Does it not still happen?
Right.
I met your husband. You've met mine.
Yes. We put up with each other's eccentricities.
Yes, and that. So I think there still is a stigma.
Probably, yeah.
around paganism and things. I actually had a woman who was a regular on my show years ago who knew that you and Laurie and Allison were coming on my show. And I said, they're the witches, the green witches, and we're talking about solstice. And she refused to come on the show after that. She said it was just not her thing, and she had to honor her Christian values, and she didn't feel comfortable.
That's so sad because
It's very sad.
I honor Christian values too. And I've got great friends. I've got, Baptist and Pentecostal friends, and they still put up with me.
And so do I. And Jason over there, who's running the board today. Thank you, Jason, for
And
running the board.
but I do know that in certain of those traditions, Halloween is not allowed, and other things, because tarot reading and that is absolutely the work of the devil. So I just don't expect my friends who are following those traditions to come to my Halloween parties or
to have a tarot reading.
But some of them do.
Yes.
I
Isn't that
have a
interesting?
very, very good friend who is a Catholic nun in the States, and one of the sisters in her convent reads tarot cards and crystal balls.
There you go.
So, I just feel like I think it's not really the tradition, it's the person's mind, and some people are a little more narrow in their thought pattern.
And I also think that when we didn't understand these things, when it wasn't spoken about, that's where you get the misconceptions, right? That's where the misinformation comes from, is when you're talking about it behind closed doors, and you can't be open, and we can't have a discussion like we're having right now. We can't be open about it and talk about what it actually is. That's when you get all the weird things. But still, today, there are people, I think, who are a little nervous of it because they don't understand. Most of it comes from not understanding.
But it's only been 3 or 4 years in Canada that the Witchcraft Act was repealed.
Really?
Only since Trudeau came into power, and he repealed it. And that's when Witchfest in Toronto started, which goes all across southern Ontario now for the month of October. But one of the things they did was they took joy and celebrated that. And Monica, who runs it, that was the reason, because now it was okay. It was the theme for the first year was out of the shadows, out of the closet. Because now it was perfect. Yes, we've been doing it for years, but now it's legal.
Like anything else that's a religion. I mean, Wiccans are kind of a religion, right? So Betty Jane, before we run out of time in this segment, you used to also do the Wiccan thing.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was what I was supposed to do at the time. My husband and I joined a coven in the UK for the purpose of bringing back something that was a little, I want to say, direct to lineage and Gardner and Saunders and things like that. So we had done this for a specific reason, and we went through all our degrees. We can wear whatever color we want in cords, and I can wear amber and jet and all of those things. And then when it came time to actually hive off and start our own coven, we kind of looked at each other and went, I don't want to be a leader. I just want to do my own thing. And so, that's when I opened my shop and was able to impart information and give them things like that, give them value and good information. But it wasn't I didn't want to be in charge of a whole group. That just seemed too formal. As you said, if I wanted to be a Christian, I would have gone to church every Sunday and done my thing, but I didn't really want to do that path.
Okay, but you teach.
I do.
You teach witchcraft.
I do, but it's more about clearing up misconceptions. And even my students would tell you, it's like when you go into the first thing I say when I teach is, it's not anti-Christian. It's witchcraft. It's not anti anything. It's really celebrating the season of the year, the wheel of the year, and the seasons, and giving you honest and authentic information. Because as with anything, you can get a lot of misconceptions, and some people that maybe don't have the right ideas, and so giving them, a real direction and being authentic in it was really important to me, and that's why I started teaching.
It's interesting, too, when you look back at the ancient Roman churches in Italy, and you go to the biggest, most glorious Catholic church, and in the basement of the Catholic church is the pagan altar. Not destroyed, not torn down and desecrated in any way, but held to this day as a holy place on which the church was built. Don't tell me there isn't a reason for that. There has to be. There has to be a reason for that.
The points in the land the ley lines and their convergence show where the power is. It's all about the earth, the world, and where the pagans had built their magical holy places is where the places have to be. And that's where the churches are built, because that's where the power is in the land.
And I bet the ancient priests knew that very well, didn't they? It's not just a coincidence.
Brenda, you can feel it. You know it in your forest.
Oh,
you
absolutely.
know where the power spots are.
Absolutely. I just came back from Sedona. I was in Sedona in October, and I had tried the Sedona trip 2 years before, and I had literally put my bags on the bed in Sedona and got a phone call that my father had passed away. And we couldn't get a flight out the next day, so we spent the day in Sedona. And this year we decided we would try the trip again. And I went to one of the vortices, and it was a masculine vortice. And I didn't ask for it. I simply put to this guide, who is very spiritual, very interesting guy. I said to him, I would like to go to a vortice. I cannot climb a mountain this year because I've hurt my knee. So just take me to the one you think. And he sat with us in the car, and we were on our way to a specific place. And he turned around and started driving the opposite direction. I said, somebody need to use the bathroom or something? He said, no, I just know where we need to go. And we went to a male vortice. My dad was there. I can tell you without question, he was there. And there was a reason that we needed to be at that place. And the trees that were twisting, the trees that stand straight as an arrow anywhere else on the desert, and in the vortex, they twist in the direction of the vortex. And this is just a coinky-dink? I think not. It can't be. And the way that the energy feels, Laurie, it was out of this world. Yeah. It was out of this world. So there is something to it, the energies of the earth. And I was with a woman who doesn't believe in this stuff. Very, very Catholic, very set in her ways. And at the end, she said, I just want to learn as much as I can learn because this is really interesting. So she felt it too. Mm-hmm. And there's a massive Catholic church in Sedona. Mm-hmm. Is that just an accident? No. There's an incredible Buddhist temple there. Is that an accident? Mm-hmm. They all felt it. They all feel it. They all know it. It's a very special place. So is Halliburton, Ontario, by the way, in case anyone wants to feel great energy, magic energy, yes, where the veil is thinnest. Yes. Very close to home here. We have a lot here in Canada. We just don't kind of exploit it the way they do in the States. Okay, we have to take another break, and when we come back, as promised, we will be talking about some more seasonal roots around this solstice celebration. You're listening to Fresh Waves. I'm your host, Brenda Masson. We have Betty Jane Ware and Laurie Benson in the studio this morning. We'll be right back.